أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم ففهمنا سليمان وكلا آتينا حكما وعلما رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم سبحانك اللهم وحنانيك ألمنا تنسني ولا تنسني الحمد لله أفضل الحمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آله وسائر النبيين والصالحين وسلم اللهم وفقني واهدني وسددني واجمع لي بين الصواب والثواب وعذني من الخطأ والهرمان آمين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I will say that the topic that I will discuss with you is what we would consider to be an adult topic. I noticed one or two young children in the audience. It may not be necessarily appropriate for them. I'll allow the parent to make their own decision if they feel it's appropriate. We are talking about a topic which we have concerns about being taught to primary school children. So we need to take that into consideration. The title, when Monana Sahib first spoke to me, the original title I came up was with Navigating Muslim Sexual Identity. That's the title I first came up with. But after some time I reflected over the title and I felt the title was too specific. So I removed the word Muslim and left it at Navigating Human Identity. And I also took out the word sexual because the identity that we're going to speak about is of such a matter which impacts on all form of identity, not just the sexual identity. And then I also added a qualifier in which I said I added the 21st century because this is something which is novel, something which has happened only in the last few decades. So eventually the title became Navigating Human Identity in the 21st Century. Now, there are certain identifiers which exist, but let's first start with the identifier which is most common. And this is referred to the word sex, which is a biological identity. We have Dr. Saab here, I'm sure he can elaborate on this further. But this is about how we define one human by their genitalia, their genetic difference, deep voice, hair on the face, certain body parts, and we say that that person is a man. And similarly, there are certain genetics and certain physicality of an individual which we say that person is a woman. And roles are assigned to that person based on that sex, which are termed as sex roles. So this is one type of identity which is quite common and has existed up until really the 50s and 60s, 1950s, 1960s, and even arguably beyond. It was only recognized truly in probably around sort of the 2001, 2002. Prior to that, this was the only form of identity which was recognized. Now we all accept that there's a third identity which is referred to as intersex. And around 1 in 1,500 children that are born with genitalia which could easily be of one gender or the other. However, parents have a choice very early on to take preventative measures in order to choose for their child which particular sex they want that child to be. So whether that's usually through hormonal treatment or even an operation later on in the child's life, that decision is made. And we're well aware of that. We find that in our books of fiqh, Kitab al-Khunsa. So that's the first identifier. The second identifier that we have is what's now called gender. So this is the second identifier, so termed gender. And gender is something how an individual personally defines themselves and how they define themselves based on the society that they live in. So this is something what we would term a social construct. This is not a genetic thing. This is how society has deemed this term. And this will be where we have people who would describe themselves as transgender, people who describe themselves as non-binary, that they are on a spectrum of gender, and people who would say they're actually gender non-conformity. So this is the second type of identifier. I'm just going to recap again. So we had the first one, which was a sex, which is the biological one, which we all understand. And then there's the second one, which is gender. And sometimes what happens, there's a clash between sex and gender. So a person is physically a male, but they construe themselves to be a woman. Their gender they feel is a woman, but their physicalities are that they're a man. So we start to see this clash of gender and sex. The third one is what's termed as sexual orientation. Now this is different than the others as well. So this is a third kind of identifier, sexual orientation. And this is usually referring to the romantic or sexual attraction that a human has towards another human. So we don't get confused with gender now. We're talking about sexual orientation. So we have terms like heterosexuality. And sometimes, unfortunately, we kind of buy into that when we're filling out a form and it says, you know, sex MF, and we tick M or F, depending obviously what we are. And then it will say heterosexual, and we will automatically tick heterosexual without realizing that by accepting that term, we also have to accept all the other terms, whether they be homosexual, bisexual, asexual. This is an acceptance of that social construct. So if you look in terms of how gender has been defined, I have a quote here. Gender refers to the socially constructed characteristics of women and men, such as norms, roles, and relationships of and between groups of women and men. It varies from society to society and can be changed. This is what needs to be understood. We've talked about sexual orientation. This is the romantic or sexual attraction towards another person. We've talked about gender, is which an individual will identify themselves. And then we've talked about sex, which is actually the genetic makeup of the person, the physicality of the person, the biological aspect of the person. The American Psychology Association, when it's referring to sexual orientation, says it refers to a person's identity based on this attraction or related behaviors and membership in a community of others who share these attributes. Those are the three identifiers. Now we need to understand, how does the Sharia understand these? Does the Sharia legislate these? Does the Sharia accept these? Does the Sharia not accept these? So let's look at the first one. Clearly, the Sharia accepts sex in terms of man and woman. It gives specific roles based on sex, as in a man should do X, and a man should do Y, and a man should do Z, and a woman should do A, and a woman should do B, and a woman should do C. It recognizes that. But when it comes to the others, whether it be gender, which is based on social rules, or whether it be sexual preference, which is about shahawat and hawa, desires, it does not consider them. It does not consider them. So if a man has sexual desire towards another man, this would come under the broad concept of shahwat. It would not be something which would be an identifier, because an identifier is solely related to their physicality, their biological physicality. So this is important to understand. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean that we should negate and challenge? You know, we live in times where people are afraid to speak. Unfortunately, the Muslims are the first ones to self-censorship, where they don't want to speak about things which they believe, which they hold firmly, for fear of repercussions, for fear of X, for fear of Y. And yet, at the same time, we feel sorry for Muslims living in Syria, Palestine, Kashmir, Pakistan, Bangladesh, whatever. Sometimes we should also look at ourselves to think, are we under more of a problem than they are? Because our own identity is at risk as to how we define ourselves. So maybe we should feel a little bit sorry for ourselves as well whilst we're doing that. However, we're not here to thump our fists in the air and wave banners and shout and scream, even though we're from Bradford. We're not here to do that. We need an intellectual response. We need an intellectual position, a narrative. We need a stance in order to provide the necessary guidance and leadership to our Muslim community. So we then have something called the Equalities Act 2010. This is law. This is law. You do something against the Equalities Act, you're breaking the law. You are what we term by somebody who breaks the law, a criminal. A person who's a criminal can obviously be taken to court, and obviously punishments could be meted out for that person. Now, in this Equalities Act, it is such that there are certain characteristics which are called protected characteristics. These protected characteristics are what the law brings to protect, to ensure that people of whatever identification do not harm, have prejudice, discriminate against these other groups. But before I get to the Equality Act 2010, I want to mention something else, which is called Section 28 or Clause 28. Now, this existed under the Local Government Act 1988, in which, and I quote, shall not schools, this is referring generally rather, shall not intentionally promote homosexuality or publish material with the intention of promoting homosexuality. This was law in this country. What about with schools? In schools, it said, promote the teaching in any maintained school of the acceptability of homosexuality as a presented family relationship. Law. It stayed as law until the 18th of November 2003. That's only 16 years ago. In 16 years, there's been such a change for the government to make those statements to now Muslims even saying, is homosexuality really haram? In 16 years. It's shook us so badly in 16 years that we're ready to change and reinterpret the Quran, to look at hadith and look at them with one eye closed, looking the other way. So we need to just take stock. In fact, the question arises, how did it change? It was because homosexual groups stood up against it, stood up against the law. Whether it was Stonewall, other groups, they stood up against this law and fought against it, spoke against it, until eventually the law was removed, as I said, in 2003. And unfortunately for you, for the Scottish couple of people that we have here, it was even before that. So what do we do now? So that's the historical context there. We have there in Section 28, Clause 28 in the Local Government Act 1988, where this thing was going on. As time has progressed, obviously, that has now been removed. Because it's now been removed and we have now the Equality Act 2010, we have this which is to protect against discrimination, whatever the type of discrimination it is, whether it's direct discrimination, indirect discrimination, harassment, victimization. And we support any law which does that, whether it, to direct, indirect. So the law in itself is there to protect all types of people. And we don't live in Darul Islam. We live in a society where we're a minority. So we need our rights protected. So who are the protected, or what are rather the protected characteristics? The protected characteristics are age, marriage and civil partnership. So those two, if I speak from a school perspective, those two would be specifically aimed towards staff members. Disability, pregnancy and maternity, race, religion or belief, and then we have the three that I spoke about: sex, gender reassignment, sexual orientation. These are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 protected characteristics. So you will find that schools have a statutory obligation to ensure that they safeguard and ensure that the protected characteristics are in place, and they have either curriculum or they have things in place to ensure that these characteristics are protected. Whether that be a state-maintained school, whether that be a Darul Uloom, or whether that be an Islamic school, it applies to everybody. It's law. And because it's an Equality Act, it applies to your employment. It applies to a masjid. It applies to this building here. It applies to any organization which exists within the UK. They need to abide by the Equality Act 2010. So schools now have to try to bring that about. Schools now have to put curriculum in place. Well, they've had to since 2010, but it's only now that they're putting more pressure on them. Need to put things into place now in order to ensure those characteristics are protected. Generally speaking, most schools are doing a good job at this. Generally speaking, they're working with the community. Whichever the community they may be, whether it's a Muslim community, a Jewish, a somewhat conservative Christian community, or whoever the community may be, and they're taking things on board. However, and we're here to speak about the however, in some cases, there are certain schools which are taking what we have described as a pro-LGBTI approach. Or if I was to rephrase that, a more aggressive LGBTI approach. It's that we're concerned about. That's where our concern lies. We as Muslims accept that we tolerate the other. We tolerate those people who are different than us. We have tolerated relationships without nikah in this country since we arrived. Non-Muslims live together without nikah. We tolerate those relationships. Gambling, alcohol. We've tolerated that all day long. We've never pumped our fists and waved banners. We accept that people are different than us and they choose a different life, as long as we are allowed to practice our way of life. It's live and let live, the philosophy we buy. However, because we have a small group, a minority, who take the approach of queering the classroom or smashing heteronormativity, who take a very aggressive stance. So whether they be the likes of Moffat in Birmingham, for instance, and he takes a very aggressive approach, the material they may use, the curriculum they may use, then clearly that's going to have a problem, because what people fail to realize is one of the protected characteristics within there is religion or belief. And one protected characteristic can't trump another protected characteristic. Why should sexual orientation trump religion or belief? Why should gender reassignment trump one's religion or belief? And governments have given this broad sort of understanding of this and allowed schools to develop their own curricula. They've allowed schools to go about and do it in their own way. And as long as the inspectors see what they wish to see, then they will say that that standard has been met and tick that standard off and job's a good one. So it's up to schools to do that. So what we suggest is that each community works with their schools. And I know, as I've been getting in touch with people up and down this country, there is a lot of good work going on. There are times where bad work goes on. We had a Muslim person in a London school who came in and he gave a lecture on homosexuality, or he talked about his way of life, and he used the phrase, homosexuality is okay in Islam. He said that phrase. Children took that to home, parents became aware of it, they came in, spoke to the head teacher issued an apology. And we apologize. We're not here to promote what your religion tells you what you can and can't do. That's not our job. So please, and that was fine. There was no need to stand outside the school waving our fists and making a scene, because we can achieve in a more diplomatic way. But when the school refuses to budge, when the school is refusing to engage with the community for which it is serving, when the school feels that it is there to educate the community on its morals and ethics, then that's something which obviously the Muslim community will not tolerate. The ulama are there to educate us on our religion. That's their job. It is not the job of schools. Our morals and our ethics have come to us through the Quran and the Sunnah. And it is those who are learned in the Quran and Sunnah to educate us on that matter. Not necessarily schools. Yes, it's the school's responsibility to ensure we tolerate one another, because not every parent may do that. So the school's responsible to ensure that we all get along. It's for the benefit of the government that we all get along. It's the benefit for local council that we all get along. We can see that. We see the logic in that and we accept that. But what we have issue with is this, where it's a more aggressive approach. So as a result, a few colleagues and myself, we put together a statement which we sent around. I think we had over 150 ulama signing that, and it's still people signing that. You can still sign it to this day. Because one of the things that we need to do, and there were 3 objectives, and it's on my phone, and at the moment it's recording, so I can't go to my phone, but there were 3 key objectives. One of the objectives was to provide support to our community. It's all right, us ulama, or the ulama, sitting on the minbar and saying, ye bi haram, wo bi haram, ye bi haram. And then when our Muslim community says, come and support us, we say, sorry, I can't do that. Then we should be able to go into public and also say, ye bi haram. Who are we frightened of? Do you not fear Allah? That's our responsibility. It's a divine responsibility that's placed on the shoulder of ulama to do that. So it's one to say, we are with you, we support you. You're not alone. Because if we can imagine certain parents who may not be as educated, who may be feeling frightened, who may be feeling victimized, who may be feeling harassed, who may be directly discriminated against, indirectly, which the law is there to protect. So we want to ensure that your voice is not falling on silent ears. Your voice is falling in our ears, and we are doing something about it. So we've issued a statement. We've also made some publications. You can find that from the Islam 21C website. We've made some pieces. And inshallah, if you go there, sign up. You can continue to do so. If you want to, you can just pass me your name on the way out and we can sign up. Once we see, because one of the things could be, maybe the government is looking to see which areas or which places within the Muslim community are actually disagreeing with this. Because in a way, if you keep quiet, that's saying that you agree with it. So they'll say, okay, that community agrees with it. We can push a more aggressive LGBTI curriculum through that area. But this area is picking up. Bradford is not liking this. We've got lots of Bradford ulama saying they don't want this. So we won't deliver it in Bradford. But maybe Batley is okay. Maybe Dewsbury is okay. So we need our ulama to then say that, no, sorry, we're not here to disagree with the law. What we're here to is the way it is being carried out, the way it's being practiced, how it's influencing our young people, how it's confusing them. And I'm not going to go into all the statistics and data and information of how young people are now confused as to whether they're a boy or a girl. So instead of focusing, we struggle to understand the bigger picture, like, who am I? Even in our 40s, we sit here trying to answer these philosophical questions. Who am I? Where am I from? Where am I going? What is life after death really like? And these poor children who are just about trying to work out what 2 and 2 is 4 are now being told that you could be a boy, but you could still be a girl at the same time. So he's thinking, how does this work? So is this the confusion that we need for our next generation? And this responsibility falls on us, because in the Quran we hear, kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat linnas. We don't expect that, we always hide behind our Jewish cousins, hoping that, if the Jews are allowed to do it, then they won't ban it because the Jews will stand up and we'll just cheerlead on the side. This is something that we stand up for, and we've had a lot of positive feedback from your average parent up and down this country, Muslim and non-Muslim, saying that what the Muslim community is doing is fantastic. They're fighting our corner in doing this. So, I hope that I've, in the 25 minutes or so, been able to give a broad understanding. The first part, I focused particularly on human identity, what the Sharia understands and accepts and what the Sharia disregards. I then said, yes, we live in a diverse world. We live in a world where we are different people. And within the UK, we can clearly see the multicultural, multi-faith world that we live in. And we accept that. We tolerate that. We get on with each other. But then the law itself is there to protect our religion and our belief. So what we can't have is one aspect of protected characteristics allowed to trample over other aspects of protected characteristics. So as a result, my last few words will be, work with your local schools, be engaged. Okay, schools love for parents to get involved, be engaged. There's no need for rhetoric, there's no need for loud voices, there's no need for stamping feet when the doors of communication are open. It's only when schools themselves close those doors of communication, like we've seen, that people have to stand up to them. Wa akhir da'wana alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. Sorry. If you're only allowed to ask easy questions. Any difficult questions, I will ignore that you asked it and I'll move on to the easy one. Ji.
Can we take our children out of the class because what they are teaching we don't know?
Ji.
Do you know what they are going to teach in a classroom?
As of September 2020, in primary schools, you can take your children out of sex education. but you can't take your children out of relationships education. In a secondary school, you can take your children out of sex education if the head teacher agrees. But you can't take your children out of relationships education. Now, relationships education is not a big problem. It just talks about some people get married as one man and one woman, and some people, two men get married, and some people, two women get married. Now, we know that some people drink and some people gamble. So for us, as long as we're educating our children, then they will understand that. The only problem we have is because the textbooks and the curriculum is up to the school, we do not know what it is they're actually using in order to deliver relationships. Now, one thing we need to understand is that there is no classification for educational material. So, for example, in a film, you'll see PG, 13, 18. So anything which is violent, anything which is of a sexual nature will be 18, and you can't watch it under 18. But if something is educational, you can actually show things with the view that this is educational. It is not classified then. So really, we need to ask, what material will you be using? How will this be taught? Can we see long-term plans? Can we see the lesson plans? And there should every right to do so. If a school is working with the community, then they will be so happy that you've come in to discuss that because they want to work. We had a similar situation in a London school where the children were being advised based on ACSL, the Association of College and Schools Leadership Organization, which advised that Muslims should not fast. And they gave this out to all the children. The community was very upset at this. We're telling our children that it's afzal to fast, that is mustahab to fast, and you're on the other hand saying don't fast. We're not on the same sort of thing. So Maulana got in touch with me. We prepared a fatwa together. I sent it down. The school was very happy for that fatwa. They then enclosed that with their letters, gave them all out, and I don't know, the whole area, the cluster of schools also gave that out. So,
two more questions. Are
G?
you working with the Jewish community or Catholic and everybody? Are you working together or not?
Currently, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get our Muslim community together. And so what we've spent is nearly a year or so trying to get the Muslim community to engage with this topic. You see, we're doing all this with the 95 other jobs that we have, whether it's running schools, running madrasas, there's Darul Ifta, lots of other things. So it's one of the things we do. It'd be great to have support from other people who can do the work whilst they can be under the guidance of the ulama. Brother, they had a question. Sorry, the brother next to you, Mona. This brother is.
Yeah. The question, it's not a question, it's a statement I'm making. I've just basically heard that you said something about relationship education and sex education. I mean, me and Maulana, we've been in this campaign locally for about 6 months. Relationship education, I think, is probably the deadliest time-ticking bomb that's waiting to go off. And the reason why I'm saying this, is that if a 4 or 5-year-old child...
Well, can I say this? Can we keep the statement short? Because otherwise, really, this is a question-answer rather than... if it's something you want to have a private conversation...
You just mentioned something that I find it very disturbing, and don't take offense.
No.
Relationship education is very, very dangerous.
Yes.
The thing is, like, a 4 or 5-year-old
yes.
has this imprint that 2 daddies and 2 mummies,
yes.
right? Then this is the end of...
That's right. Let me get that back to you on that. That's right. I will carry on. It is law at the moment.
Whether it's law or
No. Sorry, brother. It is law at the moment. I'm not going to stand here to tell you to break the law. You can break the law yourself. Feel free to do so. I am not going to stand here. Please don't debate. I'm answering your question. I'm not here to. Well, then maybe you should be, making statements. Then I'm here to explain to you, and no, I'm going to stand here to say to you, go break the law. Okay? Any questions? Is it a question, sir? Maulana, is it a question? No, then I'm sorry, I'm not taking statements. Thank you very much.
It's just questions for now.
Yeah, there's only questions. This is not time for statements. Inshallah, you ask the organizers, and if you would like to hold a seminar here, if you would like to speak here, then ask the organizer, and I'm sure they'll arrange that. G, questions, please. We're not having a debate, brother. It's questions only.
Assalamu
alaikum.
It's a fantastic job that you've done with the Islamic 21C statement. It's just a shame that ulama in Blackburn aren't on board with signing this. Just wanted to raise one point. Is PSHE, there's that disguise within primary school education which schools are teaching at the moment under the guise of sex education. I just think that maybe the audience in our Muslim community nationally need to be aware of this.
Yeah, fair point. Where they put their curriculum is up to the school. So whether they choose to put that within PHSE, whether they have something called SEAL, whether they hold it in some other area, that will be assemblies. They can actually deliver that curriculum in whichever way they see fit. So it would be a case of you asking the school where they are delivering their relationship education, and ask that question and look through there.
Sorry.
G,
Just to clarify,
G.
that comes under the sex education element, and as citizens, if we have young children, we can request...
You can request for withdrawal. So you wouldn't necessarily need to know where it is being delivered. What you would say is that I would like to withdraw my child from it. So then they would be obliged to do so.
But the point is...
What we don't want to do is turn this into a discussion. So there are other people who want to ask questions. You see, I'm being calm as well with you, Otherwise I'll go into stodgy mode. Take it. I'm being relaxed with you. I don't want to go stodgy on you. G.
Sorry, I'm just trying to change the wind a little bit.
Yes, please do.
So, see, I know the focus is on the syllabus and on the curriculum, but anyone who has children, they learn a lot from their peers, okay? So even if you pull out your children, if it was possible, which is not, they might still get the message across because of the environment. So I'm going to completely change it and say, what's the best way to deliver difa'an, to counteract this to children? Should we be holding maktab? Is there a syllabus? Is there something that's been worked upon? So,
Yeah, he's got a loud voice, don't worry.
No, it's for the Abbas. Just repeat the question and your answer. It's for the Abbas.
Oh, I see. Okay. So Morana's asking here that how best to deal with this scenario, because it's not necessarily just the curriculum, but because there is what's called the hidden curriculum, which is what's embedded within the school and within the student body. Wouldn't that also impact on the students? Well, I have a simple answer for that. That's why we set Islamic schools up. In the 90s and 2000s, I gave up my job, what I was doing, and I set up Islamic schools. That's what we did them for. Unfortunately, our own community does not engage with that process. So what they should be doing is community should be supporting. And I heard 1 or 2 Islamic schools have closed in Dewsbury. That should never happen. An Islamic school opens, the community is supposed to support it. They're supposed to put their money where their mouth is. It's easy to sit and talk and shout, but you support the community. We start from grassroots. It's not about our opinion and our ego. It's about supporting the community from grassroots. Unfortunately, we didn't do that. So let's just say that option no longer exists. So we now go to the other option, is something to counteract that, if you could say. And that would be within the maktabs. Again, I would say, unfortunately, from our own community, as soon as our child does khatam, and it literally means khatam, means after that, I'm never going to touch the mushaf again. Why is that in our community? We make so much effort to ensure that our children are going to maktab, yet our own qiraat is wrong. Our Suratul Fatiha is wrong. We're making lahni jali like it's a joke. Why are our elders, as in people past the age of 14, whether they're 14 to 18, 20 to 30, why aren't they also going to educational Islamic institutes and learning their deen? Because unfortunately, they themselves are also having an impact on their children. So yes, you can counteract it for that, but then you're only going to counteract it with the up to maybe 12, 13, 14, if you're lucky, and then they're again outside of the reach of the ulama.
Is there something to make it easier, like a maktab syllabus for,
Yeah, I think, I understand what you're saying, but the only thing is in a way, it is counterintuitive, because what you said with regards to the hidden curriculum that exists in the schools, you can't challenge that with a curriculum, if that makes sense, because you can challenge a narrative with another narrative. It is an approach one could take. I'm not dismissing it, but it's an approach that can be taken, and one would see the results of that and see if it's a worthwhile project. We don't want to turn it, I want to give other...
That was my question.
Oh, what was your question, sir?
You went off on a tangent.
Oh, did I?
Do you have any material that can be taught in maktabs?
As of now, I personally do not have material that can be taught in maktabs. There are a group of people that are working on this, but unfortunately, depending on, what shall I say, their... yes, and also their own enthusiasm of some people. Then enthusiasm, some people want to be a little bit more belligerent and take that kind of approach rather than saying, how do we deal with this problem? Chap right at the back. Sorry, Wa alaikum salam.
May Allah reward you for all the efforts that you're making and the clarifications that you made in your speech. Would there be any mileage in now that you've got so many ulama who signed the statement, in having a meeting with advisors of the government? Because in this country, mashallah, the good thing is that because of the democracy, the government are prepared to listen to representatives of large proportion of the Muslim population. So maybe there might be some, if there's any mileage in speaking to them and having dialogue and having a discussion about our specific views.
In terms of the law itself, this is my personal view, I can't see the law changing, the Equalities Act. I can't see that changing, I'll be honest with you. It will be seen by the government and the people around it as regressive, not as progressive. And we live in a liberal democratic society which is always want to be seen as being progressive. So I can't see that changing. So what we can do is, I'm a realist, I'm a practical person. So what I would suggest is how that is being delivered is very much open to the schools. That's where our focus should be. That's where our energy should be. That's my view on the matter. The brother here. You just wait for the mic because the sisters can't hear.
What is the best way to take our concern to the school? Like, should we go through the governors, or should we take it directly with the head teacher or administration?
I would say it depends on each school, how each school is run. Sometimes head teachers are very visible and they're very approachable. And sometimes it's the governors who are. So I would mainly say it's horses for courses. Depending on how your own school is, you flag that up with somebody. You may even want to flag it up with your class teacher. Flag it up with somebody and see if it's moving. And if you see a bottleneck, then go around the bottleneck. Because sometimes there's a block and people don't take the message further. And then you take that message further still until you see something. If nothing is happening, then, I don't know if there's like a parent-teacher association or things of that nature. You can try to address it through there. If not, then you can get a few like-minded parents together and say we wish to call a meeting and we wish to discuss this point. As I said, we don't take a belligerent approach. We try to work with the schools and try to get a best result.
Okay, I've got one question from downstairs as well. A couple of questions, but it's very closely related. There was a question from downstairs, and it's more or less similar to the question I was just asked. What if the school doesn't get engaged and allow parents to withdraw their children until 2020? What if the school refuses to show lesson plans? And essentially, what happens when the school just basically refuses to engage and consult parents, essentially slamming the door in their face? What advice would you give to parents in that situation?
Well, we've seen what's happened in Birmingham where they've actually stood up against that. That is one approach. If the school is refusing to engage with the Muslim community, then the Muslim community has every right to challenge that. But that should be done in an organized, structured way. I repeat, we need to engage with those who are learned amongst us. Sometimes we can be a little bit hot-headed and try to take the matter in our own hand. We consult ulama, we consult our elders. If I get involved in anything, I still to this day consult my elders. I don't feel that I have an opinion which I should express or a position I should take unless I express it to my elders and see what the elders' mashwara gives us. There is khair in that. But when each man thinks he's his own sheikh, each man thinks he's his own person and start to take matters in their own hand, then it has repercussions and ramifications on the whole Muslim community because of those individuals. But if a school slams the door in your face, then you have every right to object and use whatever processes are available as within a democratic society to stand up against it in whichever way you may. That's everyone's right to do so.
Okay, I think I'll just wrap that up there.